Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Mo, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Mr. Paramahansa Purishikacharya Austerity Shri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila HG Dravida Swami Prabhupada ki jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Purishikacharya Austerity Shri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavanda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Ravi too. I could be a little higher. Give me two of those sheets there, because this maybe Sureshwar may come. You never know. Hare Krishna. Thanks. Yeah, I'll get it. I got it. Okay. All right. You need the other one. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tapas. Number? 16, right? 15, okay. All right. Okay. On this 8th day of November 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in chapter 17 entitled The Divisions of Faith. We're on page 650, text number 15. Uh-oh. Anudvega, karam, vakyam, satyam, priyahitam, chayat, svajayabhyasanam, chaiva, vanmayam, tapa uchyate, anudvega karam vakyam, satyam priyahitam chayat, svajayabhyasanam chaiva, vanmayam tapa uchyate, anudvega karam vakyam, satyam priyahitam chayat, svajayabhyasanam chaiva, Vanmayam tapa uchyate. Anudvegakaram bhakyam. Satyam priyahitam chayat. Svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva. Vanmayam tapa uchyate. Anudvegakaram bhakyam. Satyam priyahitam chayat. Svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva. Vanmayam Govardhan Prabhu. Anudvegakaram bhakyam. Satyam priyahitam chayat. Svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva. Vanmayam tapa uchyate. Dimitri, go ahead. Anudvegakaram bhakyam. Satyam priyahitam chayat. Svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva. Vanmayam tapa uchyate. Jeff, you want to try? Go ahead. Anudvegakaram bhakyam. Satyam priyahitam chayat. Svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva. Vanmayam tapa uchyate. Danabari. Anudvegakaram bhakyam. Satyam priyahitam chayat. Svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva. Vanmayam tapa uchyate. Do you want to try? No, okay. Okay, yeah, that's okay. Vijay. Oh.
Anudvegakaram vakyam.
Anudvegakaram bhakyam.
Satyam priya hitam chayat.
Satyam priyahitam chayat.
Svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva.
Svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva.
Vanmayam tapa uchyate.
Vanmayam tapa uchyate. Anyone else on the Zoom land?
Anudvegakaram bhakyam.
Anudvegakaram bhakyam. No.
Satyam priyahitam chayat.
Satyam priyahitam chayat.
Svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva.
Svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva.
Vanmayam tapa uchyate.
Vanmayam tapa uchyate. Anudvegakaram bhakyam. Satyam priyahitam chayat. Svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva. Vanmayam tapa uchyate. Okay. Anudvegakaram, not agitating. Bhakyam, words. Satyam, truthful. Priya, dear. Hitam, beneficial. Cha, also. Yat, which. Svadhyaya, Vedic study. Abhyasanam, practice. Cha, also. Eva, certainly. Vakmayam, of the voice. Tapa'a, austerity. Uchyate is said to be. Now, just before we continue, we're absolutely sure that we did 14 and 15, 13 and 14, huh? You weren't here. Tapas, you're 100% sure we did 13 and 14. Okay, because I forgot.
Yes, Prabhu, I'm also sure that we did 13
okay,
and 14.
that does it. I'm defeated. Okay. Translation. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. One should not speak in such a way as to agitate the minds of others. Of course, when a teacher speaks, he can speak the truth for the instruction of his students. But such a teacher should not speak to those who are not his students if he will agitate their minds. This is penance as far as talking is concerned. Besides that, one should not talk nonsense. The process of speaking in spiritual circles is to say something upheld by the scriptures. One should at once quote from scriptural authority to back up what he is saying. At the same time, such talk should be very pleasurable to the ear. By such discussions, one may derive the highest benefit and elevate human society. There is a limitless stock of Vedic literature, and one should study this. This is called penance of speech. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Shri Parampara. I guess what I had forgotten was that we'd done 14. Just to review, 14, 15, and 16 comprise the austerities in the mode of goodness. You don't learn that until text 17, but these are all austerities in the mode of goodness. It's also possible to perform austerities in the mode of passion and in the mode of ignorance. We have a perfect example of austerities in the mode of ignorance in Hiranyakashipu, the great demon who performed severe austerities for thousands of years in order to become more powerful than anyone else and become immortal and all these different things. So the whole point of this chapter is to discuss faith in the different modes, and also a lot of other things in the modes. We've already discussed food in the modes and several other things, I think. Sacrifice is also being talked about earlier. So now but these particular austerities in the mode of goodness are all important for devotees to understand also. So the first one was austerity of the mind, right? Austerity of the body, excuse me. That was text 14. And that had to do with austerity, like worshiping the Supreme Lord, the Brahmins, the spiritual master and superiors like the father and mother, and in cleanliness, simplicity, celibacy, and nonviolence. So the first austerity, really, now how is it an austerity of the body? Well, the first act of worship practically is bowing down, isn't it? The first thing you do when the curtains open, you bow down. You come into the temple, you bow down to the spiritual master and the other devotees. So that simple physical act is a very important principle. I discussed this earlier, but many of you weren't here, that there's a book that my old god brother, wonderful friend, Gopi Puranadana Prabhu, translated called Krishna Lila Stava. This is by Sanatan Goswami. And it consists of a summary of Krishna's Vrindavan Lila. And woven into the recitation of the recounting of these pastimes are various obeisances. Just like we say Namaste or Namo Namaha. So there's many obeisances within these verses. And at the beginning of the book, Gopi Puranadana Prabhu, he gives a little purport on what is the significance of offering obeisances. And this very word, Namaha, just like you hear, I haven't looked it up, but I bet you it's in the English dictionary by now. It's like so many, English just vacuums up words from all kinds of languages. So certainly ashram is there, yoga is there, many other things. Samadhi probably. So similarly, namaste is there. If you go onto the Indian Airlines, you'll hear from the flight attendant, namaste, namaste, right? In fact, when COVID finally hit, they said, well, instead of shaking hands, you can do like the Indians do, just like this. Nice. So what is that? What is the real significance of this namaste? So he described he quoted from the Padma Purana, I believe, the different levels of actually offering obeisances. There's what you get on the Indian Airlines, which is more or less hello, welcome. They're not really offering their obeisances to you. They're not really surrendering to you, right? They're just greeting you. So that's okay. There's even an emoji, right? You can just hit the emoji. So it's nice and polite, basically. But serious offering obeisances is a physical act, right? So first there's the one where you're not fully, it's not dandavats. The word dandavats means like a stick. You're lying down with your hands, In fact, it's science. 8 different parts of the body are touching the ground, So that's the ultimate, physically, of offering obeisances. But then there's one that's not complete, like we do, bow down, but not all complete, we're not lying on the ground. So that's also serious, but it's not as complete or as heartfelt, if you will, as the other one. So now the word namaha is interesting. Nama. not mine. This body of mine that I'm thinking is mine is not really mine. It belongs to you. Prabhupada, it belongs to you. Gauratai, it belongs to you, Radha Krishna, whoever you're bowing down to. It's meant for your service. That's the ultimate in bowing down. Now you can see how significant that is. This is the austerity of the body. Pujanam. It doesn't mention bowing down, but pujanam consists of worship. Part of it consists of this offering of obeisances. You'll see if you do any puja, you bow down, usually outside of the altar, but you're still bowing down. So now who too? Deva, Dvija, Guru, Pragya. Pragya is honorable people in general, right? Worshipable personalities, yeah. So you're recognizing that there are these superior personalities who it will benefit you to hear from them and to serve them. That's what this is all about. And it's an austerity because it means that you're placing your own judgment, your own independence secondary. And you realize, and you're recognizing there are these higher personalities who can help me in my life and who can. So this is an important aspect of austerity. Then another one is shaucham, cleanliness. That's an austerity because it has to happen every day. In other words, this is a dirty world. This is the world of Maya, and the cleanliness helps the mind to stay calm and in the mode of goodness. So shaucham, staying clean physically, your where you live, your clothes, etc. And arjavam. Arjavam was simplicity, right? Simplicity. Yes, simplicity. This is a basic principle. What was Prabhupada's famous phrase? Simple living, high thinking. This was the ideal society. Just the opposite of what we have now. Complicated living, right? So many plans to try to make more money and do this and do that, or you're under a load of debt. What could be more complicated than to try to pay off this, pay the rent, pay this, keep your head above water. Society is so arranged to complicate your life. You make life complicated. So, but devotees realize that what's the advantage of simple living? The mind can become peaceful. The less you feel you have to possess and all the things, you're unsatisfied. What's that state that we want to try to, preliminary state in the 18th chapter? Brahma Bhuta, right? So the quality is Brahma Bhuta prasannatma, na shochati, na kankshati. Just think about that. Naturally joyful in your life. Where do you find that? You have to be able to access the spiritual reality within you. And in other words, otherwise you're going to be shochati and kankshati. Not shochati and kankshati, but you'll be desiring so many things you don't have, and you'll be lamenting those things you can't have or you lost. So this Brahma Bhuta platform is na shochati and kankshati. Who can actually be free of lamentation and hankering? Those who are tuned in, who are experiencing the natural happiness within. This is a basic principle of Krishna consciousness, that we all are by nature full of ananda. By nature. We've lost that nature. We're trying to regain some of that ananda, that bliss, through sense gratification. But it's frustrating because it's temporary. And the kama, it burns like fire. It's never fully satisfied. But we are by nature pleasure-seeking beings, and we have it as our birthright. We're part and parcel of God. And if God is not full of ananda, what kind of God is that? God means he's Satchit Ananda. He's eternal, full of knowledge, and full of bliss. And this says it right there in the Brahma Sutra or Vedanta Sutra. Anandamayo Vyasat. These nice little phrases. It's nice, easy to memorize. Anandamaya Vyasat. Abhyasat means by studying his life, by studying his activities, we see that everything is full of ananda. You won't find that studying my life. I got this, If life is very tenuous. Your happiness and you know, peace of mind is very fragile. Any little accident happens or something, you know, and it's immediately disturbing. But Krishna's not like that. He may be, you know, battling Kamsa or playing with the gopis or whatever he's doing. He's always blissful. You can't shake it. That's the idea. And we're part and parcel of God. We have that birthright also. So we're in an unnatural state now. And this Bhagavad Gita and all the science of bhakti is meant to bring us back to that state. So accepting the necessity of these austerities is an important first step. It's all part of Krishna consciousness. So simplicity, brahmacharyam, minimizing or eliminating sex life. Sex life is important for propagation of Krishna conscious, of saintly persons, right? You're going to have to be. Prabhupada, he was once talking about the different acharyas, and he said, yeah, brahmacharya is there, but all these acharyas are children of somebody. In other words, they all took birth. Lord Chaitanya had many of his disciples and followers who were householders. But brahmacharya means sex life for begetting children, begetting good children only, or no sex life. Ahimsa, non-violence. Now this word comes up several times in the Bhagavad Gita. And non-violence is the default for devotees. In other words, you try not to do harm anyone unnecessarily. They're all living entities. They all have their lifespan that they're leading, whether it's an insect or even a plant. There's no, you don't uproot plants unnecessarily, you know. What to speak of other human beings or like that, sentient beings. So that empathy is an austerity, especially if your practice has been one of just disregarding that, eating meat, you know, that has to be one of your first austerities. Ahimsa is part of that. So these are the austerities of the body. Now today we read about the austerities of the speech. So much keys on the sound vibrations that you hear and the sound vibrations that you speak in Krishna consciousness, hearing and chanting. You can form your consciousness into the most degraded possible by hearing degraded sounds. At the beginning of the second canto, at the end of the first canto, Parikshit asks these critical questions. That's going to kick off the whole Bhagavatam. The first canto is kind of an introduction to the whole Bhagavatam. There's some very important instructions there. But the actual speaking of the Bhagavatam by Shukadeva to Parikshit begins in the second canto. And so Parikshit asks a question at the end of the first of many. He asks the question, what should one hear? What should one do? What should one hear when death approaches? Because he had 7 days to live, right? So how does that pertain to us? Prabhupada said, we don't know if we have 7 minutes. we should live as if this is our last minute of life, so that we can focus on Krishna. We're supposed to be thinking of Krishna all the time. That'll take us out of the realm of birth and death and go back to Godhead. So Parikshit asks the question, and what does Shukadeva says? He says, Vadiyanishate prashna krito loka hitang nipa atmavit samatang pungsam shota vyadisha yakparaha. Very nice question. Of all the questions that can be asked, they're very nice. Krito loka hitang. That question and its answer is beneficial for all humanity. Loka hitam. The word hitam means benefit or welfare. It is approved by all self-realized souls. Thank you very much. But then in the next verse, he describes just the opposite. Oftentimes they'll give contrasting verses. And this is how you see it, just like any painting, because things contrast, you can see the difference. Learn what's going on. So he says, Shrotavya jinirajendra ninang sanjita hashyata pashyatamat tattvam griheshu grihamedinam. Grihamedinam means materialistic householders, those who are just not grihastas. That's it. So they have millions of things to hear. Just see the proliferation. When I joined the Hare Krishnas back in 1973, there was no such thing as the internet. No one even had imagined it yet, I don't think. You know, yeah, there was radio and TV, but there was no radio and TV in the ashram. You know? So we had this. If you're going to hear something, actually throughout all the corridors of the temple we were walking, we'd always hear Prabhupada. either giving class or bhajan, which is great. You can imagine. And we had what we were going to speak about. Well, we had the books. You learned, you heard the classes, you repeated. So this is the austerity of the speech. Speaking sounds that are truthful, pleasing, and beneficial. This is exactly what we're hearing now. Prabhupada dedicated his whole life to that. What was he doing? He was speaking. When he was typing, he was speaking. And that's another way of speaking that can benefit so many millions. So the people who knew him before he came, they always said he's typing, or he's going off to get the BTG printed, or he's distributing the BTG himself, or he's giving talks, or he's doing kirtan. When is he not speaking about Krishna? When he's hearing, he hears spiritual master. So hearing and chanting are the foundations of everything, of our consciousness, material or spiritual. So important that the Vakya that we hear and the Vakya that we speak is true, is pleasing, and is beneficial for everyone. And that's Krishna consciousness. This Sanskrit language is such a refined. You know what Sanskrit actually means? It means perfectly composed. I once read something that really startled me. NASA, who would ever think NASA had anything to do with what we have, the space organization. They were searching for a language that they were going to use in their computers or something to guide the rockets or something, And they decided to use Sanskrit because it was so perfectly composed and perfectly balanced. I don't know how they did it, I didn't know, but that was interesting. So speaking of priyahitam, right? What does it mean, a priyahitam? Dear and beneficial. So priya can mean that it's very delightful. Yesterday, we had Prabhupada's disappearance day, and at lunchtime, an old friend came by, this young boy, you may have seen him. That's Madhuripura. You know where his name comes from? Madhuripura comes from a verse about the holy name, because he really is very good at kirtan. He lives in Laguna Beach now. He's probably there. If you go to those Long Beach programs, you'll see him there. And he's a son of an old friend of mine. He was born into the Hare Krishnas. And his father lived up nearby here for many years, and then he moved away. Anyway, so I met him. I had the good fortune a few years ago to stay with him in Mayapur, in his father's flat. He has a flat there in Mayapur. And I was getting him into shlokas, So he comes by here, and he reminds me of one that I hadn't chanted in years. It's not even a shloka. It's prose, like we do, the prose. But this prose is not ordinary prose. So this is just to illustrate the incredible aesthetic quality of the Sanskrit language. So this is a verse, I think, spoken by Chitraketu, who was a great devotee. He got cursed by Parvati to become a demon, and he was born as a demon outside and a devotee inside. And his name was Vitrasa. It's all in the 6th canto. It's a very, very dramatic story. I won't get into the details. But he was when he was realizing, for like 6-7 days, he was chanting this mantra given to him by Narada, and at the end of that time, he realized God. Very quick, even quicker than Dhruva. So this is one of the verses that he was chanting, or that he chanted, I think, when he had the revelation of Sankirtan. He was worshipping Sankirtan. Om Namo Bhagavate Mahanubhavaya Mahabhut. No. Yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Mahanubhavaya Mahabhuti Patiye Sakala Sapata Padavida Nikadakata Kamala Kudmalo Palata the Chadana the Bindikula Padabapadamastin Namaste. That's all one word. Sakala Sapata Padavida Nikada. Now what does it mean? If you know the meaning, So what do you say? I offer my obeisance unto you, O great Lord, full of all kinds of wonderful powers, Vibhuti Patiye. Sakala Satvata means all the devotees. You're surrounded by all the devotees in the spiritual world. He's meditating on him. Padavida, and with their lotus bud-like hands, they're massaging your lotus feet. See, this thing is too far up. It's not balanced. Oh, here we go. You have the parallel. That's one. to everything. So he's meditating on how all the devotees in the spiritual world in Vaikuntha are surrounding Sankirtan, and with their lotus bud-like hands, they're massaging his lotus feet. You know, in English it's kind of pedestrian. But the sakala sapa, the padavada nikadakata kamala kudmalo ubalalata means to what is it? To deal very gently and be lovingly, massaging. So the Bhagavatam is known as the ripened fruit of the tree of the Vedic literatures. And it's very sweet because it's been touched by the lips of Shukadev. It's known that a parrot, if he pecks away at a fruit, is supposed to get sweeter. So Shukadev was a great poet, and he enhanced the Bhagavatam with his poetic ability. So we have that, and the writings of the Goswamis and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this is the ideal priyahitam, vakyam that are both true and very delightful and give benefit for everyone. So we can learn those and repeat that. And svadhyaya abhyasanam, to study the Vedas, to study the literatures. Just like Vaisheshika Prabhu has this program of Chad, this was mentioned, chapter a day of Bhagavad Gita. So one can chant the Sanskrit and the English, or just read the English, or somehow go through a chapter a day and feel the presence of Krishna. These are the words of Krishna, our worshipable Lord. They're always beneficial and ever fresh. You'll find new realizations throughout. There's that story of the Brahmin that Lord Chaitanya saw in his South Indian tour, who was in the temple, I think Rangachetra, one big temple that Lord Chaitanya came on. And there was this Brahmin who was reading Bhagavad Gita, but he wasn't really able to chant it. He was just making sounds, and because he was illiterate. And there was others who had known about him, and they were teasing him, "What are you reading there?" So he wasn't saying anything. But Lord Chaitanya said, "What are you doing?" So my spiritual master told me to read the Bhagavad Gita every day, even though I'm illiterate. So I'm doing what I can. I'm surrendering, and going through. But Lord Chaitanya said, "But I see sometimes the tears are falling from your eyes. Why is that?" He says, "Because as soon as I pick up this Bhagavad Gita, in my mind's eye, in my heart, I see this scene of Krishna and Arjuna on the chariot on the battlefield, dramatically in that no man's land between the two armies. And Krishna has taken the role of his servant. He's, the chariot driver is the servant of the charioteer, of the chariot fighter, the warrior. And but now he's teaching him the Bhagavad Gita. So that moves me so much that the tears fall from it. So Lord Chaitanya, you're the real knower of the Bhagavad Gita. He gave him a big hug, and parted Prema Bhakti like that, So we've been given these transcendental vibrations that are the perfect way in which we can follow this instruction of Krishna, that perform the austerity of always speaking about Krishna, quoting slokas. I remember years and years ago there was a friend of mine. He would walk around. This was in L.A. They have the whole campus up there. He had a little book bag, and in the book bag he had a nectar of devotion. And whenever he would see a devotee standing and not going somewhere, he said, "Hey, Prabhu, you want to hear something from the nectar of devotion?" And he would pull it out and start reading. It was a nice practice. So we have the opportunity to do that. Okay, any questions on this verse or the previous verse? Okay, now.
Hare Krishna.
Vijay, Krishna, go ahead.
Yes, Prabhu. Related to these three austerities, body, speech, and mind,
yes.
My question is as follows. If we decide to ignore the observance of these three types of austerity, what is it that it is going to happen to my body, to my speech, and to my mind if I go in the opposite way, if I ignore it completely, the practice of austerity?
Well, that's the mode of ignorance. You'll be in the modes, and those modes, when your mind is controlled by that, and your body and speech and everything, then you're sure to be conditioned and you're sure to get another birth. Probably not as a human being if you let yourself get affected. The point is, unless you follow the principles as we've been given them by our forebears, our acharyas and gurus, you will be victimized by Maya. Very powerful. Daiviyeshu gunami mama maya durotyaya. This is Krishna's energy. He's saying there in the 14th verse of the 7th chapter that this material energy is very powerful, consisting of the modes of nature. And don't forget, guna means rope also. You're tied up. And you cannot overcome it on your own energy. It's impossible. But one who surrenders unto me can easily cross beyond it. So the surrendering process, part of it is the accepting these austerities in the context of Krishna consciousness. And if you fail to do that, then you won't die. Nobody dies, right? The soul never dies. But you will be condemned to another birth, and as Prabhupada would say, if a devotee has left the movement, he says, "Oh, his whereabouts are unknown." You'll be blown around this world, the universe. Yeah. So these instructions that we have are really a shelter for us. When we surrender to them and observe them, we're on the safe side, because then we can be protected from the influence of Maya. Otherwise, we're condemned. We're doomed. We're doomed to continue our suffering journey in this material world. And that's why it's important to read the parts of the Bhagavatam, especially. There are so many points. We're going to come in the teachings of Bharat, in his rebirth, in Jada Bharat, teaching Rahugana. There's a whole story. We're just embarking now on the life of Bharat Maharaj. So, and he describes the forest of enjoyment, which is this world, and the difficulties and the pains. And before we get to that, we're going to get to after that, we're going to get to the descriptions of the hellish planets. I just reviewed that. Oh my God! This is one of the chapters I edited back in '75, almost 40 years ago, for the marathon. I did the hellish. They gave me the chapters that no one else wanted to edit. No, anyway, they're all beautiful, wonderful chapters. But there I was working on that, and oh my God, I mean, I grew up in New York. I remember I was never attracted. Was anyone ever here attracted to eat lobster after they'd cook it live in the pot? I mean, even the commies. I was an atheist. I couldn't imagine doing that. Have you ever heard of that? In the windows, they show the lobster. He's alive in the window. They said, "Oh, very fresh. You come in and we'll just put him into the pot and they're boiled." And this is what they do in these restaurants. And there's a special hell for people who eat that. It's described there. You're boiled. You go into the pot, a boil, and you're boiled, and not for 5 minutes either. Thousands, millions of years. You don't die because you're in your subtle body, see? It's even more horrific. At least if you're in a gross body, you'll die and then take your rebirth, it's bad enough. So these things are real. And then in the 6th canto, at the beginning, very beginning, Parikka says, well, how can these people be saved? He's feeling compassionate for even the sinners, how can they be saved? So it's very important chapters because it describes the potency of the holy name. You have to atone for the sins. But the problem is, even though you may perform austerities and sacrifices to atone for the sins, you're not uprooting the desire to perform the sin again. It's like some drug you get addicted to. You can, your friends or relatives can drag you off to rehab, Just stay here for a while. Okay, all right. So you're there with others who are also following, and for a while you say, okay, it's good. But as soon as you leave, you hang out with your old friends, and back you go. Because the desire is still there. But what's that verse, 259? Daniel, you should know this one. Vishaya b'nivartante nidahara siddhehinak rasavajam rasopyasya param drishtranava. Dhanabhai knows. Anyway, we'll work on it later. So this is a verse that we can all relate to. Anyone who's practicing Krishna consciousness and feeling the benefits. And that is that it's Vishaya. These are the objects of the senses. So if one by willpower decides to give them up, then for some time, this verse says, they'll turn away from you, you can do it. But the desire for them doesn't go. But by experiencing param drishtva literally means by seeing the param means the Supreme, God. By experiencing Krishna in your life, even the desire is gone and you can remain fixed in detachment. So that's the key. So if you don't practice these austerities, that means that you're being victimized by your senses. You're being victimized by those material desires that we've cultivated all this time. And I'll end with this one verse. You've heard it before, Vijay, because you've been listening to my classes. And this is a very key verse. Lord Chaitanya shares this with Sanatana Goswami at the beginning of the part of his instructions where he's explaining the process of devotional service called Abhideya. Kama dinang katina katita palita nideshas tesham jata mayna karuna natrapano prashantihi utsrijaitan ariyatupate sampratam labna buddhis tvamayata kshadanam abhayam mam nayung svatma dasye. In how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy. Yet on I've gone shamelessly in trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. There's a lot in that verse. And it describes someone seriously embarking on the process of devotional service. So at first we have to recognize our dangerous position, that we're living with our worst enemy. What's the worst enemy? We know from the 6th chapter. You know. The mind. The mind. The mind can be your best friend, but it can also be your worst enemy. And there's a verse which I don't know the Sanskrit. That mind, which is full of ideas for sense gratification, is your worst enemy. But that mind that spontaneously thinks of Krishna is your best friend. The gopis are like that. They can't stop speaking of Krishna. Sometimes they complain to each other. Kimi hikunamakatsya bruma kutum kutamashya katayata katamam nyandam yamaho vidayeshaya amodada modada smera kare manonayanotsave kripana kripana krishne trishnam chedam batalambate. Daniel, you think you memorize that tomorrow? Okay, we'll work on it. So he says, so one gopi is saying to the other, say Radharani is saying, Kimi hikundamak kasya bruma. Whatever we've been doing to try to meet Krishna, let us be finished already. Say something auspicious, old friend, but do not speak about Krishna. Say something, else. But alas, his beautiful, sweet, smiling form is in my mind. I can't forget him. Mano Nayanotsave, who is a festival for my mind and eyes, Oh, this wretched desire to meet Krishna is increasing more and more. So this is the gopis in their high ecstasy, The point is that they're in the enviable position of never being able to forget Krishna. That's the whole point, is that they're completely absorbed. And therefore they're always at the highest levels of bliss. Even though sometimes it may seem that they're in anxiety, crying and separation. But that's another thing. So to come from where we're at, where we can't forget sense gratification, to go to where you can't forget Krishna, that's the process of devotional service that we're trying to reach. So the idea is, if you don't bother with these austerities, then there's no way of practicing Krishna consciousness, and there's no way out. You'll be victimized by your own mind. Is that okay, Vijay?
Oh, Dravida Prabhu, again, better than okay. Better than monumental answer to my question. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Prabhu, if I may, in accordance with your monumental answer, a life without tapasya is the same as? Would you be there finishing my sentence? A life, human life without tapasya, without austerity is the same as?
Animal life.
Oh, thank you very much.
Rishabdev, he says like hogs, Don't act like hogs and dogs. Act like human beings and accept divine austerity for your purification.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, Dhanabai. No, you have to push the button till the light goes on.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
So my question is related to this verse, Devi Hisa Gunamai Mame Maya Durataya.
Which one is it? Devi
Devi Hisa Gunamai Mame Maya Durataya. So you mentioned that because Maya, Krishna says Maya is hard to overcome, it's my energy, and unless you surrender to me, you cannot do it by yourself. So when we are chanting and we are doing, bhakti, we realize that it's a lot better than before. It's going, Maya is attacking less and less as we chant and we progress. But sometimes it comes, and does that mean that our chanting is not attentively, we haven't chanted, that's why it came, or we didn't do sadhana good?
That's one reason. That's the usual reason, is that for some reason or for some way or other your sadhana has become weaker, and so the modes are sneaking in, and previous desires or things are coming in. So the role of prayer is so important. In fact, prayer is practically central to our whole practice. Prabhupada said that chanting is really a prayer to Krishna and Radharani. Please engage me in your service. And the more that we can feel that we're helpless without Krishna. See, I was explaining this morning, how the advantage of Kali Yuga. There's an advantage in Kali Yuga. There's so many disadvantages. It's an ocean of faults. But the advantage we have is that we're obviously so helpless and we're so disqualified that we have no other shelter, have no other hope but calling out to Krishna and depending completely on Him. You see? Well, if we recognize that and we actually do it from the heart, we will be protected. And we'll find our attraction to Maya becoming less and less. So, and staying less and less. But it's a question of sustaining that. Because as soon as we stop or become inattentive, then those material desires are already there. As Krishna says, as you quoted, Duratyaya. Now, Prabhupada, as you said, and you're quoting the translation, it's difficult to overcome. But in American parlance, difficult means it's really difficult to win the New York Marathon. Which means, but if you try hard, you'll be able to do it. But no matter how hard you try on your own, you'll never be able to cross Maya. So Prabhupada, in the word-by-word meanings to that verse, he says, very difficult. And I think I'm going to push to try to put that very in there. At least we'll have the very, But really, even though it says duratya, which means very difficult, it's completely impossible. How can you can't do it without Krishna's help. So the idea is to chant and hear with great attention and from the bottom of your heart. And to associate with devotees who are in that mood. And so you pick it up. Because association is so key,
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So...
Dravida,
go ahead.
Just to add to this idea, but also... The idea of austerity is very interesting because when I tell people or new people or friends, I follow the 4 regulative principles, what they hear is no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Right? But actually, I've been reframing how I talk about it as yes, 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 yes. By not taking intoxication, saucha, we develop clean body and mind. By not eating meat, ahimsa, we develop nonviolent qualities.
Yeah.
No sex life, we develop tapasya, self-discipline.
Yeah.
And no gambling, we develop satya, truthfulness.
All right.
So the 4 regular principles, we hear, no, 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 austere, it's sadistic, how could you do that to yourself? Actually, the huge benefit we gain brings us to the platform to really be able to sit and be attentive because the mind is less agitated as a result of following the 4 regular principles. Yeah. And the chanting is more powerful. So it's interesting, the conditioning.
That's nice. And the idea is that whereas you have the nose, we do have there's 4 regs. There's the rules and regulations. And maybe people don't know that. Probably when you talk to rules, those are the proscriptions. The regulations are the the rules are the prescriptions, and the regulations are the proscriptions. So just as it says, Anukulyasya sankala pratikulyasya varjanam. These are the first two principles of surrender. So anukulyasya varjanam is accepting those things favorable, and pratikulyasya means giving those things unfavorable. So just to give things unfavorable is not going to work. You know, as Lord Jetland said, it was the Marquis of Jetland, I think, impossible. You know, he wanted to become a Brahmin, and it was all no, 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 no. You just have to do this. Impossible. Yeah, it is impossible on its own. But if you would do the positive, you know, chant Hare Krishna, and at the same time stop listening to, you know, nonsense sound and speaking it. That's one of the austerities. Just to stop the nonsense is not going to work. To become silent. That's ridiculous. You know, is that silent? We're not supposed to be silent. Silence means not speaking nonsense, as Prabhupada explained in the purport here for Anandavagi. So that's it's a very good principle. By the positive, doing the positive things in Krishna consciousness, the negative becomes possible. You know, the giving up. And that's why Prabhupada, when he introduced this movement, it was all, come and chant, just chant with me, you know. And people were, those who were willing to take part, you know, and experiment, they found that they were experiencing something. And then when Prabhupada would speak, it would enter into their hearts, and some of them became able to actually give up those things that they were addicted to. So it's a very organic process. All right, so we have one short verse in purport here. 18, was it? No. Or we did 15. Did we do 16 too? No. Okay, we'll just read 16 through. Manak prasada samyatvam maunam atma baningraha bhava sangshuddhadityetat tapomana samuchyate. And satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, and purification of one's existence are the austerities of the mind. Purport. To make the mind austere is to detach it from sense gratification. It should be so trained that it can be always thinking of doing good for others. The best training for the mind is gravity in thought. One should not deviate from Krishna consciousness and must always avoid sense gratification. To purify one's nature is to become Krishna conscious. Satisfaction of the mind can be obtained only by taking the mind away from thoughts of sense enjoyment. The more we think of sense enjoyment, the more the mind becomes dissatisfied. In the present age, we unnecessarily engage the mind in so many different ways for sense gratification, and so there is no possibility of the mind's becoming satisfied. The best course is to divert the mind to the Vedic literature, which is full of satisfying stories, as in the Puranas and the Mahabharata. One can take advantage of this knowledge and thus become purified. The mind should be devoid of duplicity, and one should think of the welfare of all. Silence means that one is always thinking of self-realization. The person in Krishna consciousness observes perfect silence in this sense. Control of the mind means detaching the mind from sense enjoyment. One should be straightforward in his dealings and thereby purify his existence. All these qualities together constitute austerity in mental activities. So there's no time to really explore this. Tomorrow we'll be meeting again. Maybe we can discuss this. But these three are really constitute where we live. The mind, the body, and the speech. And so each one of them, there's obviously Krishna conscious recommendations or regulations for each one of them. And Krishna is giving these austerities of the mind, all in the mode of goodness, as he will explain in the next verse. And really, the mind is the key, because what you say, what you do with your body, all that's going to affect your mind, your thoughts. And that's why we find like Raghunath Das Goswami bowing down to 1,000 devotees a day. You know, it's a physical thing, but obviously his whole being is involved in doing that. It's not just a physical act. So once again, just to remind us that whatever we do, it should be done with great attention and understanding the significance of what we're doing. And just like when we come from Mangal Artik or any of the Artiks, we sing a song, we should know the meaning of it. We should take the trouble to study that meaning so that when we hear the Sanskrit or Bengali The meaning is manifesting in our heart. Otherwise, it becomes toward niyamagraha, which is kind of going through the motions. It's good that you're there, and there's a certain benefit, but it's much more if you're understanding what's going on at every moment. Okay, I'll end with one quick poem. So we did one, but then there's this aho bir nakale vaduyate sudha sudhara modalam pade pade dine dine chandana chandra shitalam yasho yashodatana yasyagiyate. Because at every step they drink a flood of wondrous nectar sweet, whose cooling power sandal paste enhanced with camphor can't defeat. They feel as if the raging blaze of Kali's days had ne'er begun. How blessed are they who fill their days with praise of Shri Yashoda's son. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.